Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach, and today we have with us Bill Bice, who is the founder of Boomtime. Bill, welcome to the program.
Mike, it's great to be with you.
You know, I want to get a little bit of your background and just kind of give us the thumbnail sketch of what brought you to this point in your career and your product and what you do to help entrepreneurs. But I thought it was curious in your bio. It says at 18, he started ProLaw Software. And then after selling it to Thomson Reuters, it just was this matter-of-fact statement that, oh, yeah, at 18, you start this company and then, yeah, you sell it to one of the biggest companies in the country. So I just thought that was just amazing. And that sure started your career off on the right foot, huh?
Yeah, it took a really long time to do that, though, because I was 18 and I thought I knew it all, and so it took a while to figure out how to actually run a business. I tried to take the opposite approach today and actually learn from others and try a little bit of working wiser instead of just harder. But, you know, the advantage of doing that at 18 is I didn't know any better. And so I just went out and did it. And it was, great in the field training and experience.
Did you have any mentors that were guiding you at that point, or did you know to look for that type of connection?
Well, I wouldn't have called it at the time, but I actually started my first sort of entrepreneurial activity. I mean, I feel like I was born an entrepreneur. And when I was 14, I would escape from going to high school and jump over the fence to this. There was Tico and Marge Navarro had this little sporting empire in the strip mall that was next to us. And it was really watching Tico and Marge run their small business and getting to create a little division with them and put on road races that really got me that, both the entrepreneurial bug and just that love of small business and what it was like to yes, work really hard, but control your own destiny. And so I give a lot of credit to that experience. And I was very fortunate to have parents that actually were, supported me going off. And because I dropped out of college because I had this company that was taking off. And frankly, what I was doing was much more relevant in the market than what I was learning in school. I thought that was a much more valuable education, and fortunately it worked out.
You said something interesting that you do hear a lot about when you're younger. You have that, you don't know what you don't know, so you tend to take a little bit more risks because you don't even know what you should be fearing. Now, looking back on it, I'm sure you can go, ooh, that was a bad one, that was a good one. Do you think that entrepreneurs today should have a little bit of that 18-year-old fearlessness, but within reason, taking maybe controlled risks? But what do you find that entrepreneurs are making mistakes in growing their company today in that respect?
Yeah, I think you do have to have that kind of fearlessness. Otherwise, you would just never do it. I mean, one of the reasons that's such a great time in your life to make that jump is you're hopefully not, don't have any kids at that point. You don't have a house payment. You really can take the risk. So it's a perfect time to make the jump. But frankly, it's gonna feel risky whenever you do it. And the thing that I think is most important in being a successful entrepreneur, and some of this I did naturally, and a lot of it I just had to really learn the hard way. But I'm a big fan of the lean startup, iterative, customer-driven approach. There's just no replacement for the CEO going out and talking to customers directly and really learning what's happening in the market. And it has to be the CEO, because you're the one person who can change whatever needs to be different about your business in order to be successful. And even when you know this, there's just something different about you hire somebody else to do the sales for you, and they come back and give you feedback, and you wonder, well, is it because they can't sell, or is it because that really is true and that's the feedback we're getting? You just have to go do it yourself.
Yeah, and then once you kind of have that feeling, now you can loop in your other people to, guide them, because the CEO then needs to do what's highest and best use of their time. But yeah, to your point, they've got to see it for themselves, kind of like what you learn in, Undercover Boss when you watch those shows, and they go out there to the field and they learn so many things that they would have never known if not for visiting the field themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And then the mistake I've made over and over again is you do that, and because you're successful selling, you believe you can now just turn it over. You can hire a VP of sales, they can go hire 5 sales reps, and instantly we're going to get more sales, but you haven't actually done the hard work of making it a reproducible sales process. And, me being successful selling does not mean we have a reproducible sales process. That's a whole nother layer of work. And you see this over and over again. I evaluate a lot of pitches from a lot of startups, and we're going to hire 5 sales reps out of the gate is the sign that this isn't going to work. Yeah,
because you just might be running in 14 different directions.
Well, and you're almost guaranteed to do that, and until you've really built the marketing foundation for the business. Having that sales team, until you've really worked through and given them the right support so that they can go out and be successful. I mean, in so many companies, the best sales reps are building their own marketing materials because that's what they have to do to be successful. I mean, imagine if you actually did the right work and took this is research that Gartner did in the Challenger sale, and the most successful sales reps spend a third of their time building their own marketing materials. And yet the company is in a much better place to do that. Imagine the uplift you would get if you just built the right stuff.
And, when you mentioned building your own sales material, I think of that as on the front end, but then the thought quickly goes to it should be a consistently updated process and document in this sense. You have your sales call, it went okay, maybe you didn't close the sale, and you do maybe even a solo debrief, or you get with a colleague and go, here's what happened and here's what they said, and maybe if I had mentioned this aspect of the product or service earlier in the conversation or later, or maybe if I asked this question. So I don't think that you ever get, done with that sales piece, that marketing pitch, because it'll always change based on who you're working with. Is that kind of what you found as well over the years?
Oh, absolutely. I think you and I have exactly the same view on the world here, because this sort of thought leadership approach is really driven by a steady stream of great content. That kind of feedback loop is invaluable in order to drive that. And the best way in any sort of high value B2B context is to, and this is really difficult to do. It's exactly what you talk about all the time, but creating that kind of really high value content is what drives the whole process.
Yeah, and I think that it's almost like the old saying, knowledge is power, and that's so false, because knowledge is potential power. You have to do something with it. Well, it sounds so easy to say, oh, we'll spend a third of your time, and even if it's 10% of your time, whatever the percent is, you got to do it. And at some point, you logically know should be done, and it just doesn't get done. So what would you recommend to some entrepreneurs? You mentioned about, let's go hire 5 salespeople. What are some of the mistakes or some of the roadblocks that you would guide an entrepreneur in scaling their business, maybe with respect to hiring a salesperson or 2? And what are some things that they should keep in mind in addition to what we've been talking about here?
So the thing that you really want to do when you're in the process of building that reproducible sales process that's really building out the marketing foundation at the same time, because the challenge with sales reps is they're just human, and if there isn't a commission check in the 60 to 90 day immediate future of somebody they just met, salespeople are not great at following up. They're not great at we invest in CRM. That is just a constant struggle we're in the business of doing this, and getting everybody in our company to use a CRM is extremely tough. So I think you've got to build the marketing platform first as part of that process and from that we get so much great data, right? We have like the opposite problem now. It used to be the famous quote, I know half my advertising is wasted, I just don't know which half.
Yep.
Well, now we have the opposite problem. We know everything that's going on. We've got to really dive into that data, turn it into information that's actionable. Well, all that information about the engagements that we're creating and following the process of our prospects down the sales funnel, all of that is how we inform creating that reproducible sales process. And so if we put that core foundation in, I mean, every B2B company should be doing the same thing, right? The website's got to be the centerpiece. There's this sort of the king is dead, long live the king in email marketing. That's the thing that really works. And then LinkedIn is just such an amazing open field right now in B2B. I look at it as this perfect networking event where I get to invite only the people I want to meet. I don't have to eat calorie-laden food while I'm doing it, and I get to talk to exactly the perfect prospects for me. There's just there's no more ideal environment than B2B. And you put those three pieces together and interconnect them and build your analytics so you can understand the customer journey across those three pieces, and you've built a really powerful marketing platform for your business.
Yeah, and I think all of those points just are like check the box, makes sense. But each one of them could be just a quarter's worth of total focus in the business, right? So, I mean, it's not just a matter, you get so many people that go, oh, fill out a marketing plan or create a marketing plan. So let's go online, get the template, fill in the blanks. Hey, there's my marketing plan. And you didn't really dive into it. So I know that you laid out a whole lot right there, but I want to kind of dive in a little bit more on LinkedIn because I think that so many people think still LinkedIn is just, the place you put your stuff up on and maybe you look for a job or maybe you reconnect with someone, but it's not used the way that it should. What are you finding some entrepreneurs are missing out on because they make a connection and you get your connection accepted, but then what? How do you use it in business development from your perspective?
Yeah, so I really look at LinkedIn. I think the networking event is the perfect analogy. So first we have to get over this idea that I'm only going to connect to people on LinkedIn I already know. That would be like going to a networking event and I'm only going to talk to somebody I already know. The whole reason I'm there is to meet new people. And once you do that, the goal is to build a relationship. So you don't show up like the guy you meet at a cocktail party who just immediately jumps into a pitch and starts selling you, you find a reason to walk away. You've got to have the same approach on LinkedIn. You've got to go in with the desire to build your network, to help the people in your network. And by doing that, you're going to turn it into a great source of business. And that means you've got to be active. So when we're running a connection campaign for somebody's profile on LinkedIn, our goal is to have 4 to 6 activities per week. So the first step is run a connection campaign. And so we'll send 40 to 50 connection requests a day, every day, day in and day out, to a very targeted audience that's who exactly we want to connect to. And now that we're building that audience, then we want to talk to them regularly. So that quality content stream, we're going to use that across all these channels, and LinkedIn is the perfect place to do that. And if you just have, let's say that you created 2 really good pieces of long-form content a month, you can use that to drive those 4 to 6 activities on LinkedIn every week, because unlike Facebook, you can repost the same content on LinkedIn very effectively. Just use different pull quotes, use the same stuff over and over again, go back to the things that you wrote a year ago, reuse that. So it's very easy to use a somewhat modest, I mean, we both know it's really difficult to create any level of really high quality content. But if you do that, then it's very easy to leverage that on LinkedIn. And the algorithm in LinkedIn is so much easier to understand. I mean, it's like Facebook 10 years ago. It's very easy to test and see what's happening. And there's just specific things you can do that dramatically increase your engagement if you just use the right tactics on LinkedIn.
And I think I'm tracking right with you, and I think some people could feel exhausted with, creating content a couple times a week. That's just exhausting. But in reality, you're doing it anyway most of the time. You get emails from prospects or clients with questions, and you answer them without even thinking twice because it's what you know, and you answer the question. Well, why couldn't you have answered that question with, maybe a little bit longer form and put it into like a recorded audio format, let's just say, and sent that back to them? Well, now that becomes, an audio you can use any other place online, LinkedIn or your blog. Maybe you have that transcribed and grab some images and pull out a quote or two or a reference to a educational journal or some piece of learning that you beef it up with. So in other words, I think that too many people think creating content is really hard, but we're doing it anyway. Is that what you've seen, and are any other tips that way that you would take a little bit deeper?
Yeah, and the problem. So it isn't that it isn't that difficult, but the reality is that the LinkedIn profiles that work. So first of all, we see much better results from the individual profiles of the executive team of the company than the company page. You got to be a fairly large company before the company page really takes off. So we're really talking about doing this for each person on the executive team. That's much more effective than, it works for salespeople to do it directly, but we always start with the executive team because that's where we get the most traction. And it's tough to get that core team to put the time in because you're running a business. And so I think you almost have to make it consistent, because what happens over and over again is you focus on it when business is a little bit slow, picks back up, and then you fall off. And this is the definition. I mean, the techniques we're talking about, what makes them work is doing it consistently day in and day out.
Yeah.
So I think you almost have to outsource it. You either have to have somebody on staff that is doing this for you, or you've got to have somebody that does this work, both in creating the content and creating that regular activity. And then if the one thing that we could get the CEO, the VP of sales to do would be to comment on the posts of the people in their network. That's the one thing that's, really difficult to have an assistant do that for you. If you do that piece, twice a week, just schedule it on your calendar, 8 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. on Monday and Wednesday, I'm going to pop into LinkedIn and I'm going to make comments, because that kind of interaction really increases the engagement for all the content that's now being created for you. So that's exactly what I do. Like I've got great content going on LinkedIn. The ideas are from me, but somebody else writes it. I review it, put my stamp on it. I comment on other people's content. If I had to actually do all that work, there's no way I could have all that great content going out via LinkedIn.
Yeah, and I think that that becomes something that some leaders, CEOs, entrepreneurs have a little bit of a trouble with, is kind of delegating and going, well, that's the time it takes me to explain how to do something. I could have done it myself. But if you do that enough times, if you can offload enough things, now it's freed yourself up to do some of the bigger thought leadership things. So I think that's just a skill that you just need to develop over time. And you're exactly right. What are some of the things that would move the needle the best and the quickest and be that thought leader? And I think finding some of those, one of the things that I recommend is finding the people that are thought leaders for your target audience, and then aligning with them. So if you're seen next to whoever that may be, that your target audience would go, ooh, wow, I can't believe old Tom knows this person. That's pretty cool. I think that becomes something where you can work that out, and maybe you do a joint, production of something, teleseminar, webinar, something where you're doing something together. And I think that helps to establish yourself rather than just the guy that made a comment on the LinkedIn post. So it's got to be a variety of things. I teach marketing at 3 or 4 universities, and one of the concepts is IMC, Integrated Marketing Communications. And the concept there is having a consistent message across multiple channels. So you cannot just do LinkedIn only, and you cannot just do one thing on LinkedIn. So it's got to be, oh, hey, here's a comment. Hey, here's a post of an article that I just wrote. Hey, here's a whatever the case is. So do you find variety is really important because your target audience will get bored with what you're doing?
Well, they will, and then what's really key is that you've got to follow the data, and LinkedIn does make this a little bit annoying because you know on personal profiles you just have to log in and look at it, and the data disappears after 3 months. So you've got to be following it. It's another reason why you really need somebody who focuses on this and is dedicated to it. And what you're going to see is the patterns of what creates engagement. And with others, so like I love Seth Godin's work, so I will quote him and link to him in the post, and that automatically creates more engagement. So including your connections in your post for things that are relevant to them, including hashtags, all of that drives engagement. One thing that's working really well on LinkedIn right now is don't make your post a link. Put the link, make a comment on your own post, and in that comment, put the first link. You just instantly get twice as much engagement just by doing that. And in our test, the click-through rate is only slightly less by moving the link outside the main post. But because you're getting twice the engagement, there's a lot more value.
And that's because someone has to both see what you posted and go down to the comment to click the link.
Exactly. And there are some unusual things about LinkedIn's algorithm. So that one actually makes sense. If the post isn't taking people off site, it would make sense that LinkedIn's going to expose it in the feed of more people in your network. The other one, the one that doesn't make sense, though, is that when you publish content directly on LinkedIn and put a Pulse blog article out there and link to that, you now get about half of the natural engagement that you would, which frankly makes no sense at all, since you're adding to content on LinkedIn, but that's literally what's happening right now. Huh. And I still think there's real value in putting your content on LinkedIn. It's just that in addition to that post that automatically gets created when you put in a Pulse article, you should then make another post to it where you use the technique of adding the link to the Pulse article in the comment.
Yeah, it's really interesting how you stumble on things like that and see how one benefits over the other. Then certainly within their algorithm, they want to be pushing things that are internally linking. So whether it's to themselves internally or there's a link that goes to an external, they're gunning for that now. So yeah, that's neat that you guys uncovered that. So any kind of final thoughts on how you work with helping entrepreneurs and business leaders accomplish some of these things that that we've been talking about? Because all of this sounds great, but I think that sometimes people would say, where do I start? What do I do? So what do you guys do to support them?
Yeah, so that's literally what we've built is that marketing foundation as a service, because what becomes really clear when you follow the data is that it's the consistency, it's that hard work in the trenches day in and day out that really makes this kind of marketing effective. It's a long-term commitment. There is no miracle fix in the approaches that you and I are talking about. But if you make that long-term commitment, the payoff from it is just so significant, because you get to this point where your audience just starts to grow organically. And that investment, I think the audience that your company owns, your existing clients, your prospective clients, it's the most undervalued asset in every company. And it is an underappreciated and underutilized asset. And this content-driven approach to marketing is the best way to leverage that. And this just comes out of my own experience building companies, right? I've been on the side of for years, spending money to get great marketing for my companies. And it's just so frustrating. And it's why I decided to finally tackle it. And because I'm a programmer at heart, I just naturally see it from the perspective of data and how do we use technology to put scale and efficiency into this so that it's much more realistic for a smaller company to apply these same kind of techniques and get, level out that playing field compared to your really big competitors who, all we're really doing is learning from them what works really well and making it something that is possible with scale and efficiency for a smaller company to implement. And I'm just such a big believer in small business. I think we have to accomplish that, because that's the driver of our economy. That's who hires everybody, is small business.
Agreed. Well, Bill, thanks so much for coming on today. It was great chatting with you. For people wanting to reach out and maybe connect with you to learn more, what's the best way they can learn about yourself and make the connection?
Yes, I love talking to business owners and entrepreneurs. My email is ceo@boomtime.com. I'm on LinkedIn. Of course, you can find us at boomtime.com. And happy to help anybody with their marketing questions. I'm following in your footsteps. I've recently started with one of our marketing strategists as a co-host, Aaron Barrio, the B2B word of mouth marketing podcast, and we're just sharing exactly the things that we've learned doing this for hundreds of companies. And
excellent.
I'm having a blast doing this.
That's awesome. Well, Bill, thank you so much for your time. It was great connecting with you, and we'll see you around.
Thanks, Mike.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.